afternoon. You're watching PhillyCam TV on Comcast and Verizon and listening to WPPM LP in Philadelphia. And this is the People Power Lunch Hour Show. I'm your host, Vanessa Maria Graber. On today's show, we are going to talk with two really great organizations here in Philadelphia that are doing amazing organizing work here in the city. First up, I'll be speaking with Karla from the Party for Socialism and Liberation. They just opened a new center in Kensington, so we're going to talk all about the grand opening of their center and all of the programs and services that they offer. And a little bit later on the show, we'll speak with some organizers with the South Philadelphia Victim Witness Service Center. Stay tuned for all that and more on this edition of the People Power Lunch Hour Show. Hey, welcome back to the People Power Lunch Hour Show. Again, I'm your host, Vanessa Maria Graber, and we're in Center City, Philadelphia today, live from the PhillyCam TV studios here, and I am joined by my first guest, whose name is Karla Martin. She is with the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and they just opened up a new Philadelphia Liberation Center. The Party for Socialism and Liberation's mission statement is to bring together leaders and organizers from the many struggles taking place across the country. The most crucial requirement for membership is a dedication to undertake the most important and most necessary of all tasks, building a new revolutionary workers' party in the heart of world imperialism. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, for people who are unfamiliar with the Party for Socialism and Liberation, can you tell people a little bit about that?
Yes, so I'm a member for the Party for Socialism and Liberation. We are a revolutionary party that has branches all across the U.S. We're a national party fighting for a socialist transformation of society, and we're involved in many struggle issues around housing, education, healthcare. We have members, community leaders, activists, workers, students.
That's really great. So is this under like the Socialism Party, which is a third party, or is this another sect of that that's different?
Yeah, so we're our own socialist revolutionary party.
Okay,
yes.
Great. So are you affiliated with the Philly Socialists as well and Workers' World, or are they different organizations?
They are different organizations, and we have worked in the past with Philly Socialists organizing events around the city.
Okay, great. But you all believe some of the same tenets, which is centered around workers and collectivism. Can you talk more about that?
That's right. So we do believe in fighting for the dignity of the people. We believe that everybody deserves the right to housing, to education, to healthcare. Everyone deserves to live a dignified life. And this is why we're involved in many different struggles around these issues. And we want to build with the working class people as well.
So some of your goals include organizing the people, right? Getting people more politically active. Have you seen an increase in maybe interest in socialism since the rise of people like Bernie Sanders in the face of the new Trump administration?
Yes, we have seen a rise in the interest of people to fight for a different world, a different society. The hope of envisioning a new world, a socialist world, has spread all across the U.S., especially since the Trump administration took over. So a lot of people are trying to get involved and learn more about political education and get involved in organizations and volunteers. So it's been great.
So a lot of people, they might say like third parties have no chance of winning, they don't have enough people. But what I see is that third parties actually do a lot of on-the-ground grassroots organizing locally. So that's kind of connected to the opening of this new center. Can you talk about the opening of the Liberation Center and how that connects to working with people directly on the ground, not necessarily to win elections, but to build a movement?
Yeah, so we're so excited. We had our inauguration this past March 17th of our Philadelphia Liberation Center. It's Centro Comunitario Pueblo Libre in Spanish. And as socialists, we saw the importance of building in the community, organizing with the working class. And this is why we opened this community center, a place, a hub for solidarity where people can organize and we can fight for social justice in the neighborhood together.
So can you tell people where it's located? It's in the Kensington neighborhood.
Yeah, so it's in the Kensington neighborhood, specifically in West Kensington, 2226 North Front Street. It's close to the York and Dauphin station. And we see this neighborhood as key to organize in Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, it's been historically a working class neighborhood. It has been multinational. It has been the home of diversity. Immigrants from Puerto Rico, Palestine, Poland have lived there for many years. So it's not only that, but also it's a neighborhood that is experiencing one of the most the opioid crisis. Sorry, it's the opioid crisis epidemic that we've seen in the last year. So there's been last year there were actually 1,200 fatal overdoses in the city of Philadelphia, and nearly half of them, so 50% of them, happen in Kensington. So it's a neighborhood that is struggling. Not only that, but it's a neighborhood that is struggling. The community center is located close to Norris Square, and people there are fighting real estate companies that are trying to displace them from their homes and building constructions that are only affordable for higher income people.
Yeah, it's definitely on the front lines of gentrification as developers move further north along that Front Street corridor, trying to get more properties. But there's also a lot of organizing happening in that neighborhood. There's urban gardens. There are, there's like the People's Socioeconomic Campaign for Poor People. There's still a lot of activity, even though it's plagued with the opioid crisis and, fighting gentrification. There's a lot of activity there from community members.
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot of different organizations that are doing great work for the community. And specifically, I feel very attached to the neighborhood because I work in Kensington too. I'm a social worker. So, yeah, it's very important for me to be in that area.
As opposed to placing the center in some affluent suburb where the need is not as great.
Right, because the focus is fighting with the community and with the working class people.
So what are some of the things that are going to be happening at the center? How can people engage with you and interact with the organization?
So coming up, our regular activities, we have tutoring, homework, SAT tutoring and homework help, and that's happening every Wednesday. It's actually happening today, starting at 3:30 till 5:30. That's ongoing every Wednesday. We also have study groups every Saturday, and they alternate between political education, which happened last Saturday, and it's basically just learning about the U.S. war aggressions around the world. And then we also have a reading group of Du Bois. We're reading Black Reconstruction in America, and this is also part of an initiative that started with the Saturday Free School. And there's different reading groups happening all around the city because this year is a celebration of the 150 years of Black Reconstruction in America, of Du Bois. So we're part of that, and different reading groups are happening around the city, and they're reading different books of him.
So how is the center run? Is there like organizers or volunteers?
Yeah, so it's all volunteer based. And sorry, so I forgot to mention other activities that we have. So we also have a film screen that happens the first Friday of every month. And we also have a community resource day, which is helping people with the benefits application for welfare.
That's great.
Yeah.
So it's volunteer run. So people who want to volunteer can go there and
yes.
help.
So
are you looking for volunteers?
Yeah, we're looking for volunteers, for everyone that is excited to fight with the community for dignity. So if they want to contact us, they can call our phone number. It's 267-281-3859. And we also have an email, philly@pslweb.org.
That's really great. It seems like this is a very unique place. It doesn't seem like there's any other center like this. It's based in socialist roots in the city.
Yeah, we're so excited to have this community center. We are starting with these initiatives, but it's also, we want to make it a place for the community. So we want to have community forums and eventually like do other types of activities. There are other two important activities that I forgot to mention that are going to be happening. Recently in Latin America, there was a death of an community leader, activist, organizing, feminist in Brazil, Marielle Franco, and we want to have an event that talks about police violence, racism in Brazil, in the communities with Afro descendants. So we're gonna have two Brazilians do like a talk about that and discuss the issues around that, and also how we can learn from a Latin American experience in Brazil to fight here. So,
yeah, that's important because if people aren't paying attention, this activist, she was also like on like the city council or something like that.
Yes.
She was assassinated, and she was loved and respected and known because of her activism for people living in the favelas, which are like the slums in Sao Paulo, and speaking out against racism and colorism and privilege and all of that, and it has sparked massive protests.
Yes, yeah. So, and actually, an important fact to mention is that she was also a socialist. She was a member of PSOL, which is the Party for Socialism and Liberation in Brazil.
So this is a worldwide movement, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and also we try another event that is going to be happening is another organization that is in Norris Square. It's called La Puerta Abierta, and they do a lot of work with teenagers that are escaping violence in Central America. And we're going to be having an event on April 14th to exhibit some of the work that we've been doing because they did a workshop with students. So we're going to be doing like a fundraiser and an event to exhibit their artwork that they've been working on in the workshop.
So how do you feel about the importance of having a space for people, like a public space for people to gather, to talk, to share ideas without fear?
You mean like...
like, why is it important to have a public space where people can gather together from the community and speak freely about political issues?
I think it's really important. Actually, as an immigrant, I'm from Chile originally, and I've been here for almost 3 years now. And when I came, I was part of the student movement, a student organizer in Chile in the 2011 protests. And when I came here, I was looking for organizations because I knew that the fight transcends borders, and I wanted to organize. And like I was living in Philadelphia, one of the most unequal cities in the U.S., where there's a lot of poverty, segregation, and there's a lot of issues here in the community. So I always thought like I tried to look for organizations, but I saw the need for a community, or I never saw that there was like a community center for the people. So it's very important to have a hub for solidarity where people feel that they can feel safe, they can organize with the community. So
yeah, and one of the other things that's happening a lot too in North Philadelphia, not just Kensington, is the gun violence, right? And a lot of people are now starting to speak out about it, especially young people. So it's another opportunity for people to come together. and talk about these kinds of issues.
Yeah, so that's the idea, that we have this community center for the people where we can discuss issues, we can do community forums, we can raise awareness, and not only that, but in organizing, you empower yourself and you are able to see that there is an alternative to this violence, to this discrimination, racism, and we can live in a different world, in a world where we are all equal as humans. So.
It seems like part of what you're doing too is trying to educate people through talks, through film screenings, through workshops. How hard is it for somebody who doesn't know anything about politics but says, I want to get involved now, I'm ready to be engaged in the political process, but they might feel overwhelmed at all of the information that's out there. And how would you say, like, what advice would you give to them to kind of start educating themselves about these issues?
I mean, it's all with the experience and with organizing, the others, like the political education comes with that. Nobody knew from the beginning, like nobody was like ideally conscious right away, with like organizing, with experiences, all these injustices, you become, you're conscious racist and you become aware of all these issues. So I would just invite everyone, if you have the need to, or if you feel that inside of you, it's very passionate to, like, yes, I want to organize, all these injustices, doesn't make sense, because that's a process that happened to me too. So just, get involved, volunteer, and with other people, you start learning from their experiences as well. So it's all about the solidarity and learning from each other in organizing.
Yeah, and a lot of the learning happens through like storytelling, right? You're telling me the story of Chile, I will tell you a story of my experience and so forth and so on. And having a space to tell stories, that's where people develop the relationships and begin to learn.
Yeah, that's right.
What are some misconceptions you think people have about socialists or socialism?
Well, I think just from what I've learned, like living, in the U.S., an imperialist country, of course, communism or socialism has been a word that has a lot of negativity around, and people are scared. But actually, if you start from just a basic, simple question, do you believe everyone deserves the right to have quality education? Do you believe that everyone deserves to have the right of housing? Yeah, why not? Why should the government decide because you have money, then you can go to a better school, or if you have money, you can have better quality access to healthcare or treatment? So I think just by asking those questions, and especially with the recent struggles that the community are experiencing with the Trump administration, people are starting to understand that it's important to have the right to these things that are human rights. So.
Right, the right to housing, the right to clean water, the right to have a job and work, and the right to food. These are very simple things, but a lot of people in Philadelphia, they lack those things.
Yeah. With my job, I see people struggling to get housing. Every single day, we have to have the hardest conversations with people and tell them you don't qualify for these programs because it's really hard to get, especially if you're dealing with an opioid addiction, to get into housing. And people are living in the streets homeless. They have, and there's a lot of programs that require you to be at least 1 year in the streets to be able to qualify for any program. And that doesn't mean that you might be couch surfing or sleeping in someone's houses every other day or at least once a week. It means that you have to be in the streets for a whole year before they even look at your application, and also have documentation for that. So
how do you get documentation if you're homeless and you don't have anything?
So it's really frustrated, yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the other misconceptions is that it's all electoral, third parties. Again, I'll say this again, just from my experience, observing, it's less about the candidates and running for office, but more about building in the community, educating people, having a group of people working together in solidarity, as you say, so that when these issues come around, there is a group of people who can fight back.
Yeah, because a lot of people feel like we have no saying, like no matter what happens in the election, at the end of the day, we're gonna be screwed over anyways. And a community center provides that where people can feel empowered and we can fight together. This is like our neighborhood, this is our community, and we want to take care of it. And we deserve to. We deserve to have a life that is, dignified, as simple as that, I would put it. So.
Well, this Liberation Center is a great first step, to, bringing in the community and inviting them into what you're doing. What is like your vision for the future? It's, they're newly opened for business. People can come in, they can interact. What do you hope the center will do? And if it's around in like 5 years, what do you visualize that it will be like?
We just hope that, we get more people involved, people from the community. We can open more programs. We would love to do a lot of work with high school students around the area, open up also more space for the arts, do art workshops. So yeah, it's just starting, but I think it's really exciting to see where it can go from here.
And you had a talk that was on the 24th about Korea. How did that go? Was that interesting? Did people show up? What are these talks like?
Yeah, at least like 15 people showed up, so it was really good discussion. So
yeah,
it's
it's interesting to me because it's like this is a heavy topic,
Yeah.
And to get people from Kensington to come to something like this, that's like successful, right? Because these are things that people typically don't pay attention to.
Yeah.
And they're not trying to understand it. So for people to come to a talk about something like this, about, military interventions and occupation, seems like a good first effort at engaging people politically.
Yeah, and also, like, it's a very Puerto Rican neighborhood, too, and I think, Puerto Rico has been fighting colonialism for years and years, so it's like, also I think it relates to people, like, maybe you don't really have all the political education to understand, but you have the sense, like something is not right. Like, we have to come, our economy is destroyed, we have to come to the U.S. to keep fighting poverty, racism, and discrimination. So
that's great. If you're just tuning in, you're watching and listening to the People Power Lunch Hour on Philly Cam TV and WPPM Radio. I'm your host, Vanessa Maria Graber. I've been talking with Karla Martin, and she is with the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and they just opened up a new Philadelphia Liberation Center at 2226 North Front Street. There's a community center that's a hub for solidarity, education, and the fight for justice in the neighborhoods. So we've been talking about that and talking about socialism. Before we wrap up, can you tell people again, like, what are some of the ways that they can get involved, and if there's a website or anything like that?
Yeah, so we have our Philadelphia Philly PSL Facebook. We also have an email that people can go to, write to us. It's philly@pslweb.org. We have a phone number, too, that people can call us to get involved. It's 267-281-3859. And just to repeat, our programs are SAT tutoring, free homework help. We are going to have an open meeting to get volunteers for that. That's coming up, so if people are interested, they can call or email us. We are going to have a film screen next Friday. It's a documentary that's called The Murder of Fred Hampton, with a featured speaker that is Yvonne King. She was a long-term revolutionary leader of the Black Panther Party. So that's going to be happening. We're going to have benefits application for people next Saturday. The event for Mariel Franco, that is going to be happening on the 8th so next Sunday. Sorry, it's a lot of information.
You got a lot going on.
We have a lot going on, yeah. And also we have the study group coming up this Saturday. We're gonna start reading. It's the first one for reading Du Bois and the Black Reconstruction in America.
That's really great. Is there anything else that people need to know about the center?
I mean, that's it. I guess just if you want to get involved, if you feel very passionate about fighting for social justice in the community, contact us. We're happy to get everyone involved in the community and learn from each other. So we're so excited to open.
And you don't have to be a socialist, you know? Like,
no, everyone.
There's a lot of people that they're no party affiliation, but they just want to help out in the community and meet other smart, like-minded people. So, you know, check out their website and stop by, right?
Yeah.
2226 North Front Street. All right, I want to thank my guest, Karla Martin.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we hope you'll come back and keep us updated here at PhillyCam with the progress and any upcoming events you might have. And again, you're here at the People Power Lunch Hour show here at PhillyCam. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to have more with our guests from the Victim Witness Services of South Philadelphia. Stay tuned. You're watching on Comcast 66, 966, and 967, Verizon 29 and 30, and WPPM 106.5 FM. Hey, welcome back to the People Power Lunch Hour show. I'm your host, Vanessa Maria Graber, and I'm joined in the studio with my next round of guests from the Victim Witness Services of South Philadelphia. They're here to talk about the organization and what services they offer to people dealing with trial issues, with crime, and with their individual rights. I'm joined to my left by Fernando Sterling, Dajah Park, and then also Benjamin Garcia. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fernando, let's start with you. Can you give an overview of what the Victim Witness Services of South Philadelphia does as it relates to crime victims, witnesses, and their families?
So, Victim Services of South Philadelphia is a victim service agency. We cover South Philadelphia, of course, which means we are from South Street pretty much to the stadiums. And what we do is our goal is to help out people who are victims of crimes and their families, and our overall goal is to sort of bring them back to what we call the pre-crime state. We work with people who are victims of what's called other crimes, so that's pretty much anything that isn't sexual assault or domestic violence. We tend to refer those out. And what that looks like is, it could be a number of things actually, but we try and start initially when a crime occurs. We get in contact with the victim and or their family members, and we see what we can help them with. This may look like help with medical expenses, help with counseling, finding them counseling, helping them pay for counseling, and throughout the entire criminal justice process. So from the first time they were in court, we want to be there. We actually staff the preliminary hearings, which is the first step in the criminal justice process. We walk them through their trials, sentencings, and we try and make sure that they're always kept informed as to what's going on with their case. And we also are, in a lot of situations, the liaison between the district attorney's office and the victims as well as their families, because a lot of the time the communication in there can, sort of fall apart at times. So we try and make sure they're always informed and that their needs are always met, and that everything that they want, that we try and do our best to get them as close to that as possible.
Is there a fund for victims that they can tap into, like from the city or the state?
So yes, a large part of what we do is we work with what's called Victims Compensation Assistance Program, and that's a state fund that's specifically put in place to help out, crime victims and their families. So one of the major parts of that, and it goes up to $35,000 in compensation in order to help, the victims and their families out. A lot of that may be to help with medical bills, as I mentioned earlier, counseling, but then it also covers stuff like, for example, if you were an assault victim, of course you're going to have medical bills, but what other people might not think about is you have to lose time from work, so they'll try and help you get reimbursed for the time that you miss from work. Things like transportation to court and to like medical appointments, things like that. People don't also think of that's also eligible. Unfortunately, if there's a homicide, they'll cover funeral expenses. Those are some of the main ones that I could think of. But yes, there's funds specifically put in place for that.
In South Philadelphia, what's the most common thing that people come in for?
I think it's debatable.
Well, you can name several.
Yeah.
So one of the top ones I think is definitely going to be assaults.
Yeah.
Whether it's a simple assault or what they call an aggravated assault, so a little bit more serious. Of course, you have the shootings. Fortunately, you have stabbings. But people also come in for what people would not think is traditionally a violent crime. So, such as like a burglary, even though, just your personal property might have been taken, or even if it's not taken, that's one of the more traumatic crimes that happen just because you feel like your personal space has been violated. And a lot of times people just don't feel comfortable with that. And, it leads to things like you not being able to sleep at night. Months later, you're still just feeling uneasy. You may want to, think about start moving, things of that nature. So we try and make sure, regardless of what the crime is, that we at least try and, bring them back, have them feel better, and help in pretty much any way that we can.
Do people have to interact with the police? There's a lot of crimes that happen and people, like, for example, someone's car might have been vandalized and they're like, you know what, I'm not going to even bother the police. They're probably not going to investigate. My insurance isn't going to cover this. But they're still a victim of a crime. Do they have to have documentation?
So to work with us, no, you do not have to have documentation of the of really anything occurring. The more that you sort of work within the criminal justice process, the more we're able to do for you. But a large problem that we run into is, as you said, a lot of people don't report to the police, either because they feel nothing will be done, it's
scared.
sort of pointless, or they're scared due to a number of factors, which Ben can extend upon, depending on the person, But in order to work with us, our loyalty sort of lies with the victim and their families. So we although we work heavily with the police department and like the district attorney's office, we are an agency on our own, centered around crime victims and their families. So to answer the question, no, you don't need to necessarily report in order to get our services. We're open to help pretty much anyone who's been a crime victim.
Dajah, you work with youth.
Yeah.
Could you tell our listeners and our viewers out there, what are some of the services or types of interactions that you have with youth in South Philly?
So it's pretty much expanding upon a lot with what Fernando said, because each one of us in the office, we kind of have our own sort of specializations to focus on communities that are impacted by violence, and we know that to be true for youth as well. So a lot of the services that Fernando said apply for them, as far as we have a lot of circumstances where youth can be assaulted, whether in school or coming from school. And so in those sort of situations, we're able to intervene to provide direct services to the student so that it doesn't put them on a wrong trajectory as far as like them not feeling safe within their school community, them sort of not being able to navigate the system, the criminal justice system, or not wanting to. We could do accompaniment for the police stations. If they need me to talk with individuals in the school, be it with the school police or the principals or their guidance counselors, that's some way that I can kind of work with them and their family, because not everybody wants to go the traditional route when filing a police report, especially when another young person is assaulted. They don't necessarily always want the other person to have to be arrested or anything like that. So we can also help them navigate different options of what can help them feel like safe and secure. Yeah.
And you're working with parents too.
Yeah. So because in a lot of circumstances, if you have a child who's impacted by violence, the family is then impacted as well, be it like emotionally or financially. So we can assist the parents that if they have to miss time from work to get recompensated for that, or if they have to go in for parking or transportation costs to go to the hospital or for counseling appointments. Those are sort of the things that we help to try to like bridge the gaps so that they can get the services that they need.
Benjamin, there is a large immigrant community in South Philadelphia. You have Mexicans, Vietnamese, Korean, Italian, many countries.
That's right.
Does that make up a lot of the constituents that are approaching you? Or is that changing now because the demographics have changed in the last 10 years?
Well, definitely, it's changing. It's increasing. Rather, Italian immigrants that we know in the South Philadelphia, it was a big wave of them coming in the past, but there's more Mexican and Central Americans coming, Asian communities, many Vietnamese, Cambodian, Indonesian fellows, and yes, we're here to help. Some of them do not speak the language, and they find a barrier there. So we try to help them to understand that there is access, like the authorities should provide interpretation or translation, and we help them to find that out, and you help them also to understand that the communication must go in the language that they understand better, so they can communicate and understand the whole process and be served, because they live in the city, so they have the right to obtain to have these services.
Do you find that immigrant community members are even more afraid of interacting with police and also like testifying in cases where there might be witnesses?
There's a lot of that, and that's also, something that speaks loud to that is an increase in the last months on hate crimes. Many immigrants have this tendency to not to want to report. So, we are trying to outreach more in the different communities and churches in the South Philadelphia area to help them to understand this, that they do have, the right for living in the city. Mm-hmm.
Are there any protections for people who maybe have witnessed a crime, but their immigration status is pending, we'll say, or uncertain? They might be afraid if they come forward, then they'll get, deported, or their paperwork will get stopped, or etc.
Yeah, no, as long as you keep cooperating, as Fernando mentioned earlier, there is always, the police should be aware. We always encourage them to stand up, to call, to dial 911, and to file, to keep record of these potential, intimidation incidents that may happen. Mm-hmm. And they can always call us, and we can help them to, guide them in the process as well.
There's a real fear, though. There's that saying like snitches get stitches. It's not just the fear of necessarily some type of revenge or repercussions, but also like it's really scary to sit on a stand in front of a judge, and the lawyers are scary enough too.
Right.
What are some of the ways you talk people through that process?
So, as you said, it can be an extremely terrifying process. And it's sort of our job to make the victim and or their families or witnesses feel comfortable, especially when we're in court, their first time in court. They have no idea as to what's going on. So a lot of the times we sit with them, we prepare sort of their case with them, make sure the attorneys go over what specific questions they're going to ask. A large part of the court process, we always make sure that they're safe. And that might mean even getting like stay away orders at court, making sure the judge signs them and explains to both parties that there can be no negative contact. And then we always like to check in with crime victims and their families after or during, this whole long drawn out court process to make sure there's sort of no intimidation going on, no harassment going on. Because a lot of the times these are people that you might see in your community. So we try and make sure always that, their safety is our first priority. So when something like that does occur, we're always sure to make sure the appropriate people know. And, just so nothing continuously happens to them.
Anything else you two want to add when it comes to, working with people and helping them?
Yeah, I think just that, we're one community-based organization for victim services, but that there are victim service agencies in each part of the city, so that it's easier for people to get the services that they need, but we also collaborate a lot with each other. So if you're victimized in South Philadelphia, but you live in North Philadelphia, you have options as far as the type of services and support that you might need. And we also collaborate extensively with other organizations. So when you were speaking about getting assistance for maybe like immigrant populations, we work really closely with Friends of Farm Workers and HIAS, so that we can help them get free legal services and that they might need. So
That's right. Yep.
And there are neighbors, Friends of Farm
That's
Workers,
right.
right
Yeah,
upstairs.
they're right upstairs.
But there's success stories too, right? There are people that get justice for the crimes that were committed against them. Have you seen that?
Absolutely. I feel like a lot of the time, once you're willing to work with the criminal justice system, a lot of people are reluctant to it, but in the end, a lot of people's needs are met. Don't get me wrong, there are people whose needs aren't met, and we're working towards that, towards getting the victims and witnesses more involved in the system, making sure people are able to sort of voice their opinions on what's going on, where they feel they were wronged. But overall, there is, I feel like, a good amount of people who feel like justice has been served on their behalf. Especially when it comes to, sentencings, being able to provide victim impact statements is a big thing for a lot of crime victims. And again, we make sure, like, even after sentencings, we stay in touch with them, see what else they may need, see how else we can actually help them, because, the healing process doesn't stop at when the court process is done.
That's right.
And justice looks a lot different to different people.
Right.
So we have the majority, I think, of our caseload are people who there may never be an arrest made. They may never have like their day in court, but we still provide services. And I think that sort of like some of the success cases are those ones who never really get the common idea of like the justice process, but that they're still able to get services and support, and that there isn't a time limit to it, and that we can work with a client for 6 months or 6 years, however long it'll take them for them to feel safe and reinsured and supported.
Right.
How difficult is it for somebody to navigate the court process alone? Are people successful at that? I mean, is it really hard if you are a victim of a crime to kind of do that on your own?
I think it can be extremely confusing. Because of we do it every day, so we sort of know the process, but even when someone's a crime victim multiple times, they may not know what's going on. They might not know the correct person to contact. They don't know what charges are being brought up. They have no idea if they need to go to court, if they don't need to go to court, what's going on in their case. They don't. Yeah, I feel like it's extremely difficult. It's even hard for us, and we know the correct people to contact. Because we aren't the ones specifically handling their cases. We aren't the ones going out there and making the arrest. We aren't the ones doing the investigation. But we definitely do our best to at least get them in contact with those people. Definitely keep them informed, and definitely get their opinions on what they would like to see happen. Because as Dajah said, justice is completely different for each and every person.
Yeah, it could be even difficult to know, like, where the case is at.
Yeah.
Like, are they making any progress?
Yeah.
Do they have any suspects?
Absolutely.
When are they going to make an arrest if they do have a suspect?
And they do have victim witness coordinators, like at the DA's office. It's just a lot of people, they don't know that like victim witness service agencies exist.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, know that there are like victim witness coordinators at the DA's office that they can speak to.
That's why we're here. Let
Yeah,
people know
exactly.
all their options. Again, if you're just tuning in, you're listening and watching the People Power Lunch Hour show on Philly Cam TV and WPPM Radio, and I'm joined by friends here who are all working and organizing at the Victim Witness Service Center of South Philadelphia, and they've been working with victims of crime and witnesses of crime to help them navigate the very complex criminal justice system and also let them know what rights they're entitled to. And so one of the other questions I wanted to ask was, in doing this, have you seen an uptick in crime? Is it less crime? I feel like people like the president, are constantly alluding to like there's more crime than ever, but some statistics show that actually crime has gone down. What have you seen on the ground? Are there more people than ever coming forward?
I think definitely there's an increase in crime, as I was mentioning. With the hate crimes, is one of them that we have noticed many more happening. Yeah, absolutely.
What types of hate crimes are being committed? Is it like vandalism, stuff like that?
So I have had cases, when fellows have been walking on the street and, different communities have simply, being aggressive with them. We don't understand the reason for that, but it has happening. So, luckily they have called the police and we have been able to identify them and help them. So many people doesn't know that, it's very important that you have to take that first step to contact the authorities. And, from there they might, they will be able to definitely move forward. And the fact of cooperating and keep moving in the criminal justice, system helps them to, to move forward and to avoid this. Definitely.
So my last question is about something that you alluded to, which is that justice takes many different forms. What is your opinion or role in restorative justice, right? Which kind of bypasses oftentimes the criminal justice system. Sometimes that means putting people together to face their accuser, their aggressor. Have you all dabbled into that?
Yeah, I think like as an organization, we definitely try to adopt more restorative justice practices. We're still sort of navigating how we like to implement that, be it whether, I know Fernando, he works on a lot of different committees along with the district attorney's office with trying to figure out like different ways to approach victim and witnesses' experiences with offenders like through the criminal justice system. In particular, like for working with youth, we are trying to navigate like different ways so that we're not like helping the school to prison pipeline with a lot of youth who are involved in violence. We definitely want to try to think of different ways of like what exactly does the victim and witness want, and they don't always necessarily want incarceration. They want accountability, they want to feel safe, and so we try to focus on how we can address those needs first.
Right. Sometimes it's just somebody wants an apology and they want a promise that they're not going to do that again. But I think there is a rush to call the police and make it a criminal justice issue. But that's not, in fact, the best way for some people to deal with a situation.
And they also have, we're all trained as crisis responders, but there's a network of neighbors organization. So they're a crisis response sort of model, which is based on this idea that if someone in the community is impacted by violence, that instead of having other people sort of kind of come in and intervene, that people are trained within the community to deal with the violence themselves. So I think that sort of falls in line with the restorative justice idea of trying to find different ways to do that. So we could definitely share their information because anyone in the city can be trained to be a crisis responder. And what they will do is once they're invited within a community, they can help do coping groups, self-care groups, and stabilization groups like after an incident has happened. So that's a way that a community can sort of deal with violence without necessarily having to go through the criminal justice system or not feeling like they've been forgotten as well.
That's great. Before we wrap up, is there any other services or information that you want to add and let people know before we wrap up the show?
Anything to add? I guess Well, the people working in gun violence and involving the youth in South Philadelphia, trying to get them wake up their interest in activities that are rather positive towards prevention or restorative justice, if you wish. I think that's also groups that are working in South Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Right.
We also have events coming up, so if anybody wants to come and join those,
Right.
We have a candlelight ceremony on April 13th. Friday at
6 doors open at 6 and the event starts 6:30.
And where's the location?
21st and Chestnut.
21st and Chestnut. So if
Yes.
anyone's impacted by violence, it's a great ceremony for people to kind of come together.
Right.
And we also have I'm like terrible with the dates. We have a
27.
fundraiser.
April 27th,
as well.
Friday as well.
Yeah.
At the Fletcher Sanctuary on the 800 block of Catherine Street.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how can people find out about all these events and services?
You can follow us on Victim Witness Services on Facebook of
Or
South
on Instagram.
Philadelphia, and that's where we post like a lot of our information.
Right.